Hello, good morning, and welcome to this special Google Hangout. We're broadcasting live from the U.S. Consulate General here in Lagos, Nigeria, and I'm Oluwaseun P, compare and radio host at 99.3 Nigeria Info. It's such an honor and delight to be here with Patrick, Claire, and Katrina, and they are American consular officers here at the U.S. Consulate General. And today we want to talk about basically the U.S. visa application process and all that has to do with applying for a visa, getting a visa, and going on a trip to the U.S. So good morning, guys.
Good morning.
It's good to be here. And I'd like to say on behalf of Nigeria and people who are watching in diaspora, we say thank you to the consulate management, to the acting U.S. Consul General Dihab Gibrab. I always struggle with her surname. Yeah, did I get that right?
Yes.
So we say a big thank you to her and the rest of the management for creating this platform for Nigerians to ask questions and for us to dispel some of the myths and misconceptions that are attached to applying for a U.S. visa and all whatnot. All right, so just some basic information. We want to deal with, as I've said, U.S. visa applications. We might not be able to answer specific questions that relate to specific visa application processes. So if you recognize Claire or Katrina and you didn't get a visa and you have a particular grievance, this might not be the the platform for the expression of that grievance, or the might not be able to address those questions. But if there are any other general questions, we would love to take them. We'd also like to let you know that you can send questions in. If you look at the top right corner of your screen, you would see something that looks like this. If you click on it, a little box will come up and you can send your questions. We're going to see the questions live here and we're going to take questions. Now, we might not be able to take all the questions. What we'll do is we'll sift through and pick questions that we believe represent, what some of the other questions might be. All right. So just thought to set some ground rules there for us. All right. So where do we start? I think it would be nice to get to meet you guys. Patrick, Claire, and Katrina. I've had the opportunity to meet you guys already, and we've had a chat. But for those watching now, where do we start? I think ladies first, right?
Sure.
Katrina, go ahead. Well, like Shane said, my name is Katrina. I'm originally from Michigan in the United States, and I do non-immigrant and immigrant visas here at the consulate, and I've been in Nigeria for almost 2 years now.
Okay, okay. Have you had egusi soup yet and amala?
Yes.
Okay.
You know, I would consider myself a foodie. I love trying new and different foods, so I have tried as many different Nigerian dishes as I can take.
And what is your favorite?
I would say my favorite is pepper soup.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, I like fish pepper soup, goat pepper soup. I could do that all day. I do. That's probably my favorite. Yeah.
That's good. That's good. All right, Claire.
My name is Claire. I have been in Nigeria only for 1 month now, so I'm one of the newer officers. Before this, I was in Muscat, Oman, on the Arabian Peninsula, so a little different. I'm excited to be here, and I have not had the chance to try pepper soup yet, but I am a big fan of pounded yam.
Ooh, okay,
yeah.
okay.
So that's been my new discovery.
Katrina,
here.
please, you need to sort this out, man. She needs to have some pepper soup.
Oh, we'll make sure that she tries everything.
Right?
That's
Yeah.
good.
Yes.
That's good. That's good. All right, Patrick. It
Yeah.
seems like we've talked about just food.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's more. There's more
I
beyond
was
food.
just
Definitely
trying
more,
to say
yeah.
something interesting about myself. But we don't have to keep talking
About
about
food. All right, all right. So, Patrick.
Hi everybody. We're glad to be here
Does
to.
Patrick have a Nigerian girlfriend?
Patrick is a very lovely and awesome wife. Who
Oh,
also
my
lives here at
God,
the
okay,
consulate.
okay.
Yeah.
She lives here.
She lives here. Okay, so tell us.
So first of all, welcome everybody, and we're glad to be here to answer your visa-related questions. My name is Patrick, as Sean P said. I've been in Nigeria here with my wife and 2 pet cats since December. So I'm 9 months old now, and really
Okay.
liking it.
Okay.
I've lived previously in a few sub-Saharan African countries, and I have to say I find Nigeria to be extremely complex and dynamic. I really like it here so far.
Extremely complex and dynamic. I love that. Someone once said one of the best ways to describe Nigeria is organized chaos. I don't know if you guys have seen that. It's beauty in the vibrancy and life and everything. And so you're welcome to the complex niceness that is Nigeria. All right, so let's get on with it. I think for me, I would like for us to start off with what you guys think is the most important myth that needs to be dispelled when it comes to visa applications. Here.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And for me, I think the biggest myth out there is the more documents you have, the more likely we are to believe you, or the more likely we are to give you a visa. And I think that in the non-immigrant visa process, so if you're going for a visit, if you're going to be a student, it's really important to know that as visa officers, we're focusing on the interview and what you say, the questions we ask, your response. And so when you come with a big packet, we don't necessarily need to look at that. And so it's very important, I think, for me, that's the biggest myth. Focus on the interview, on answering our questions, and don't be so worried about shuffling in that folder and getting the right paper out.
I think this is mind-blowing, because even I thought the first time I came here to get a visa, I thought I needed to come with a lot of documents, but it occurred to me that I didn't have to show anything.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes if you talk to people who are going on the immigrant visa side, so are going permanently to the United States, which we won't focus so much on here, that is a very document-heavy process. So there are people that go to the U.S. Embassy that need a lot of documentation. But if you're going for a temporary visit to be a student, then very minimal documentation needed.
Just to follow up on Claire's point, I would agree that that's one of the biggest myths. And really, for the vast majority of people that are coming in for a visa interview, these are your people who are coming for a visiting visa. Really, all we need to see in the end is your Nigerian passport, your appointment confirmation sheet. It can also be important to bring in your old Nigerian passports. That can show some of your travel history and things like that. For students, we do need to see a little bit more, and that's what's called an I-20 form that's issued by their respective school. And we also need to see a receipt for what's called a SEVIS payment. And SEVIS is a system that helps to maintain the kind of foreign student system in the United States.
Okay. Before I go on to the other question, on this SEVIS payment receipt, that's the only form of payment that people seeking student visas need to pay before applying for the visa. Would they need to pay some form of deposit for school fees before applying to the visa? Is that a requirement?
No, for the application, when you come in for your visa interview as a student, the only fees you will need to have paid at that point is the normal $160 for the application, and then the extra $200 for a student application, and the SEVIS fee payment that Patrick has mentioned. Paying tuition for the school or any other type of extraneous fees are not required at the time of your interview.
All right. Okay, so back to the document discussion. I think that's really profound, and I'm glad that we started on this. So the question for me then is, if people don't need to show documents to prove that, prove any point, then how do you guys assess every applicant?
Sure.
How are you able to then, properly assess an applicant and then tell, who's fit to get a visa or not?
That's a really good question, Shun. I'm glad you've asked it. Really, again, going back to this documents thing, we don't need to see so many documents. And really what we're looking at is the contents of someone's application, the content of the interview that a person has with the consular officer. And we're also taking those into consideration under U.S. immigration law and the requirements that need to be met for someone to receive a non-immigrant visa, or any other type of visa for that matter. So this, again, going back to this idea that about the need for documents, we really do not need to see so many documents.
So if you fill your form well, truthfully, and you have very good intent to travel, and you have all the requirements as stipulated by the U.S. law, and I want to believe all of this is available on the website.
Yes.
People go on to do registration.
Absolutely.
And just again, for the benefit of those who might not know what this website is, do you want to tell us where people can go to get information on filling the form? Because from what I hear, you need to pay more attention to filling the form than putting documents together.
Yeah. All the information you need about applying for a non-immigrant visa can be found on our website, and that is nigeria.usembassy.gov. We've created a link to it in the showcases part of the Google platform. You can find it over on the, I guess, the left-hand side of the screen.
Okay.
That's where you can get all your information. If you do submit an application for a visa, you'll be redirected to another site. It's called ustraveldocs.com/ng. We've also included a link on the left-hand side of the platform in the showcases feature. So you can find all the information you need to apply for a visa at either of those two links.
Fantastic. All right, so we have seen some questions coming. As I said earlier, if you want to ask a question, on the top right corner of your screen, you see something like this. Just click on it, and you'll be able to ask your question. We'll get to the questions in a short while. But just looking, so we talked about documents. That's the most important way for me to dispel. But let's go to the basics.
Mm-hmm.
What is a U.S. visa? And how would someone? I know we've talked about the website already, but what is a U.S. visa, and how can one apply for a U.S. visa?
Sure.
Yeah, I think back to basics is always good. And speaking of myths, that's another myth I think that people may have. A visa isn't permission to enter the United States. It's permission to begin the entrance process. So Patrick has this great saying, it's like being able to knock on the door. The people
Doesn't mean the door will be open.
Exactly. The people in charge of opening the door are our lovely colleagues at the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, CBP, as we call them. They're going to ask you the same questions or similar questions that we've asked you as visa officers. They're also, it's important to note, the people who tell you how long you're eligible to stay in the United States. So we give you a visa, permission to knock on the door, for 2 years. But that doesn't mean you can stay in the U.S. in status, meaning legally, for 2 years. So CBP, again, are the people that determine those two things.
Okay, so I'm thinking, all right, this is not really good to hear. So the fact that I get a visa means I could get turned back at the door, you know. So let's address that as well. What are the chances that someone with a visa will get turned back? Or under what circumstances?
Sure. I mean, I think one of the biggest reasons for something like that, and again, this is rare. For the vast majority of people, it's not something they need to be very worried about. I think one of the biggest issues that can lead to a turnaround, so to speak, is if you know, because we type notes when we do interviews, and if someone from U.S. Customs and Border Protection sees, for example, that someone has told the visa officer X, but then they arrive at the border and they're saying something totally different, that can really diminish the credibility of the person who is, in a sense, as Claire said, knocking on the door to enter, and that can cause problems. And they may ask additional questions about that. And again, they always have the right, you know, per their mandate to protect U.S. borders to, in a sense, turn around someone. But that is very rare.
Okay.
And I do want to just to piggyback on that a little bit. We're talking a big difference, right? Like if you said to us, I want to go for 10 days, and you show up to CBP and you say, I want to stay for 11, that is not what we're discussing here. We're talking about showing up at the border as a student and saying, oh yes, I want to go work at General Electric in New York. Because that is not a valid use of the visa that we have granted you. And also CBP has a very good website that you can look at information specific to entrance.
And just to reiterate again, this is not something that the vast majority of our applicants should worry about. The entering at customs when you arrive in the United States, it really is a routine procedure that you do have to do to enter the United States, but it's nothing to be afraid of. It'll be very basic questions, very similar to the ones that you had at your interview.
All right, I think we should also talk again about the difference between an immigrant visa and a non-immigrant visa. I know we've used those two terms already. You know, just for the benefit of those who might not fully understand the difference between the two. And there's some people who might actually want an immigrant visa, but are applying for a non-immigrant visa. There might be that confusion as well. So maybe just, you know.
Yeah, we can give a quick overview. So the two.
And sorry to cut in. If you could also talk about all the types of visas, you know, all the subcategories.
Okay. Yeah. So non-immigrant visas are what we're basically talking about here for this Hangout. That is where we see the vast majority of our applicants here in Lagos. Those are people who are going for B1, B2, which is the basic tourist temporary visit type of visa. Another large category that we have is the student visa. And I'm sure that a lot of people that are watching out there are interested in studying in the United States. We have a lot of student applicants every year. So those are probably the two biggest categories for non-immigrant visas. And what non-immigrant means essentially is that you are only going to stay in the United States for a temporary amount of time. You do not plan to stay there permanently. There are other classes of non-immigrant visas. We do see some employment visa, non-immigrant visas. We see some for religious workers. You can find all of that information again on our website for the different types of visa classes. If you feel there might be a visa class that pertains more towards the reason that you want to visit the United States, keeping in mind that some of those you will have to have someone petition for you. But again, all of that information is available on our website. Immigrant visas are slightly different. These are for individuals who are planning to immigrate to the United States and remain there permanently to live either as a permanent resident, a green card holder as it's called colloquially, or as to naturalize and gain U.S. citizenship. And for those visa classes, you do have to have an American citizen or a permanent resident in the United States who is petitioning for you to come join them in the U.S. permanently.
Okay.
And that's a much longer process. For a non-immigrant visa, anybody can, in a sense, submit an application to the consulate and very quickly be seen by a consular officer and interviewed. The immigration process is much longer and starts actually with another agency, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services.
Okay.
And as Katrina was mentioning, that is for someone to move to the United States and become an immigrant. And the whole basis for the system is about reunifying families in a sense. And that's why there's this petitioner element. So if my child is in the U.S. Living there permanently, legally, then that child in certain circumstances can, in a sense, petition for me to join them in the United States.
Okay, well, that makes sense. Earlier you talked about the $160 that needs to be paid for the visa application. So you want to tell us about the cost? And some people say, well, if Claire is going to tell me no, she better give me my money. So I walk out with my no and my cash in hard naira.
Yeah.
So tell us, how much does it cost to apply for a visa, and can this sum be refunded in the event that the visa is not granted?
So I think it's very important to note that we don't consider this fee is not a fee for a visa. It's a fee to apply and be processed appropriately for a visa. And I think that goes to, it's understandable that people are disappointed that they don't get the money back, right? $160 is not a lot of money, but it's significant. I think that it's important to note that there is a lot of processing, a lot of manpower, so to speak, that goes on behind the scenes. All of our staff that works here around the world, we have over 200 posts that issue visas.
Oh, wow.
And that is what it is going to. We're not in the business of making money by any means. We're just looking to cover our costs. And additionally, that segues into another point, that you should never feel like you are able to buy a U.S. visa. You should never pay anyone that says to you, I can guarantee you a visa. You should never pay anyone that says, I can get you better access.
It seems like this is an important myth to also dispel, because we find that there are a lot of travel consultants and people who try to help people through the process of applying for a visa, and even almost give them a guarantee and say, hey, if you hire me and you pay me this sum, I would sort everything out for you. So what would you say to those sort of people who are, first, those offering those sort of services, and then second, those who are looking to hire those sort of people?
I think, Shayon, you've really identified one of the key problems we face at the consulate, and a problem that our applicants face even more so, in a sense. And that's this idea that if someone hires a tout or a COI, as they're called, that their chances for a visa are going to be improved. We at the consulate, generally speaking, we strongly discourage the use of a tout or a COI at any point in the visa application process. These are generally people who their primary concern is not getting you a visa. It's rather making money. And the lack of information they have about the process and how the visa works and the processing that goes behind it, it can cause a lot of problems for an applicant. So again, we strongly discourage the use of touts and COIs, and really what we encourage is for people to go through the whole visa application process on their own, that will ensure that their application is complete, consistent, and that it doesn't raise any red flags to the consular officer on the day of interview.
I'm actually sure it's possible that there's some people who, if they applied on their own, would be able to get a visa because they have the right information. And the moment they get some advice from some, so-called travel expert, it begins to push them in the wrong direction. They can bungle it.
That's exactly right. And those are the most heartbreaking cases when you can tell that someone has a legitimate desire, legitimate ties to Nigeria, and they were so nervous about the process that they felt they needed outside advice, and they're coached in the entirely wrong direction.
I like the use of the word coach.
And and so and we can tell, right? We see these over 100 visa interviews a day. We can tell, and it's very important that people come with their authentic story, with why they want to go, and that makes the world of difference.
I think one of the reasons that we're doing this hangout and that we try to reach out to the Nigerian public is to reiterate again and again that I think a lot of people feel that the application process for the visa is very complicated, and like Patrick was saying, they get nervous about it. But what we're here to tell you is that we've tried to make the process as simple as possible so that you can do it yourself. Anyone can go online, go to US Travel Docs after they've paid their application fee at any GT bank. They can use that receipt number to go on US Travel Docs, fill out their application, schedule an appointment, and come in on your appointment day. It's that easy. I
would have to say that for my own process, I did it myself, and it was straightforward. I'm very honest. So I can say that I'm as we like to use this word a lot in Nigeria, testimony. I can testify. I can testify that it's a very simple, straightforward process. Now, questions are coming in already, and we can see some of your questions. Please keep sending those questions in. We have about 37 minutes. This is something we do on radio a lot. We always give a time check. We have about 37 minutes left, so we're going to try and take as many questions as we can. And you used the word earlier, ties.
Yes.
And the first question from Idowu Oluwafemi. Idowu, we see you. Thank you for joining the Hangout. Idowu says, I would like the video to explain what ties are. And do the ties have hierarchy?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Go ahead, you start. Yeah.
Okay.
You used the word ties. So
yes, I did. So now I'm caught, so to speak. First of all, I would say that no, I don't think ties have a hierarchy. I don't think that we look first to, having 7 children, and then next to making ₦1 million a month, and then next to X. I think that it's a holistic picture. So starting with that more specific question and going to the more general, ties are what we as the visa officer use to interpret your motivation to come back to Nigeria. So that's why we ask about jobs. It's why we ask about salaries, about family. But again, there's no hierarchy and there's no exact formula. It's a holistic picture. And I think that it's important to note there's no magic number for family members. There's no magic number for salary.
Sure.
There's nothing that you can do. And again, we see many applicants a day. We have a rough idea of what a realistic salary is. And so it's important to be honest about what you make. It's also important to know that ties change over time. So just because you are a single university student making no income right now does not mean that we will always consider you to have weaker ties to Nigeria. Nor is it the case that every single university student has weak ties to Nigeria. So again, it's very individual, it's a holistic picture, and there are no magic numbers.
Just as a follow-up, and I mean, when you look at 2 different applicants, say someone who's mid-career professional, 40s, 50s, and then you look at someone who's early 20s, obviously their life circumstances are going to be very different. So they're going to have different ties. And in the case of the younger applicant, we may be more concerned with, what are your specific intentions for traveling to the US? If a younger applicant themselves may have, possibly has weaker ties, we may ask, okay, do you have family members that have travel to the United States and return to Nigeria? What does your family situation look like? And do you have a strong connection socially and economically to Nigeria? We recognize that there's diversity, and we try as much as possible to take into consideration that diversity.
Do you want to add something, Katrina?
No, I think my colleagues really outlined.
But I think
what
this
ties
ties this thing about ties is very fundamental to,
Sure.
to this entire process. I like the phrase motivation to come back to Nigeria.
Mhm.
So it's safe to say that every applicant needs to sufficiently show that there's sufficient motivation to come back to Nigeria, and you guys have to be sure about that.
Right.
Is it safe to make that conclusion?
Yeah, I would say we don't even need to be 100% positive.
Mhm.
We need to be reasonably sure.
Mhm.
And I think because that's important to note, because many people also comment that our interviews are very short. So we don't need to know everything about you. You don't need to go off on a very detailed speech about your motivations and your ties.
You're saying that with a little
yes.
like you know what, I've heard all kinds of stories.
We hear all kinds of things at
Yeah.
the interviews.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think something that might be interesting is if we turn around the question on you, Shane.
Okay.
You're someone who's traveled widely, so
Really, am I?
well, I know you've been to the U.S., right?
Okay.
Well, so I mean, what are the things in your life that keep you coming back to Nigeria in those times you've traveled? I mean, what are your ties?
I mean, the things you guys talked about, pepper soup, pounded yam.
Where else are you going to get pounded yam?
We make the best pounded yam. I could not survive. Anyway, on a serious note now. Well, it's work. This is where my life is. You know, I'm actually. You guys really turned this on me. Right? You successfully turned this on me. No, I'm the one asking the questions. Anyway, but I'm passionate about Nigeria. I love my country. This is where my work is.
Sure.
You know, so I could travel the world on holiday. You know, meet people, have fun, but I need to come back to work. You know,
I think you made a really good point when you said this is where my life is.
Mhm.
You know, and I think that's what we are looking for when we interview applicants.
Absolutely.
You know, we are, again, this ties back to the length of the interview, like you said, the not needing a lot of documents to come to the interview. We're looking at you as a person. We're looking at the snapshot of the individual. That's what we consider ties.
I have
to
an interesting
Nigeria.
question. A lot of people have, people are very present online.
Mhm.
You know, so from someone's Twitter feed, you can check them out and see what they're up to. From Instagram page,
Mhm.
from anyone's Instagram page. I mean, I do the same. You know, if I meet someone, I want to check them out, and I'm interested in the person. I mean, I go online and I'm checking the person out to see. Maybe I shouldn't be saying this because we're broadcasting to the whole world. But, I mean, everyone does it. It's not. You Google people, right?
Right.
Is that something you guys do? You know, so like Oluwaseun is in front of you, he's a radio host, and you're like,
Oh, do we
Google.
Google people?
Yeah, and you just see maybe if I tweeted something and I'm like, you know, and then you saw something I said on Twitter, and do you guys check all that, you know, as part of like background?
No, it's definitely not something that we do. Like,
Really?
You know, with every applicant. No.
Okay.
No. Yeah.
So it's not a standard procedure.
No.
It's not a box you have checked on Twitter.
No.
It seems like a normal
No,
human
we
being.
don't do that. Check Facebook page, check Twitter page. We don't do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have more questions coming in. Osamu Dianwe Enaholo says, is there a minimum monthly salary one should earn to be eligible for visa to go for a conference?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I actually want to answer an additional question that relates to this. For people who are going to like a business conference or a school conference or a conference really on any subject, the type of visa that you'll be applying for is the same visiting visa, the B1, B2. Okay, so it's a visiting visa, a tourist visa, but it's also a person can also do a conference on that visa. Okay. Now, to get to the asker's question, no. I mean, we're not looking for a certain salary. Really, in the case of someone going to a conference, what I'm more concerned about is, does it make sense that this person is going to X conference? You know, for example, does it make sense for, I don't know, like
A banker to be going to a health conference.
right, a banker to go to a conference on nuclear energy or something like that. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense.
Mm.
And so we want to see a connection with, in most cases, we want to see a connection with the things that the person is doing here in Nigeria, the aspirations they have, and their interests, and the conference itself. So there should be it should make sense, so to speak.
So you guys are not seeing, how do you then assess that this individual can afford, you know, to pay for this trip and can afford to take care of themselves while they're in the US? Because you said you're not looking at bank account or documents. A lot of people. I actually came with my bank account, which even though I wasn't asked for it. And you're not asked. You're not really seeing or checking how much this person earns monthly. So how are you able to assess that they can afford the trip? How are you able to make that assessment?
It's a good question. And I think it ties back into the similar questions we've had about, how do we assess if we're not looking at any papers and things like that. What I will say is that, we as officers, we do get a lot of training before we come out to do our job. And the purpose of the training and what we do is to assess it from the interview, from the questions that we ask. If you can speak logically about what you're going to do and why, there's a whole range of indicators that we can look at to assess whether or not we feel that the purpose of travel, as we call it, what you say you're going to do in the United States, makes sense from what you're telling us.
All right.
I would also add that, we recognize that, in this context, people rely on their families to a large extent. There's a lot of social capital tied up in families, and someone who may have a lower salary, it makes sense that they might rely on a brother who is more established, or a parent or an uncle. That makes sense.
Is that something that has to be said at the interview process?
Not necessarily,
Okay.
but it's something that we recognize in the back of our minds that people do rely on their social capital here to do things that they would ordinarily not be able to do, and that's perfectly legitimate. So.
All right, guys, we're having a good time here. This is a special Google Hangout. We're at the U.S. Consulate here in Lagos, Nigeria. I've got Patrick, Claire, and Katrina. Got that right?
Yes.
Got that. Yes. And we're answering your questions. Remember, you can ask a question if you're just joining us. Ask a question using a button that is on the top right corner of your screen. It looks something like this. Just click on it, and you'll be able to ask your question. We're sifting through the questions and picking questions that sort of like general, that can help everyone else attend to the issues that they have. All right. Back to you guys now. I know we've talked about it already, but just to reiterate, we earlier dispelled, because when we started we had about 23 people. Now we have about 43 people who might not have seen us talk about it. We talked about the greatest myth, and that has to do with documents. And then we talked about the process, the visa application process. So who wants to do a quick recap before we take more questions?
Sure. There are basically 4 steps to apply for a visa. And again, here we're talking about the typical visiting visa. You need to pay your visa service fee at a GT Bank branch or online if you have a GT Bank account. Second, you need to
use the bank account confirmation to enter the online application, the DS-160.
Right. And you also need to fill out the application, which you can find through our website. The application can be accessed directly at ustraveldocs.com/ng. And then you'd schedule a time for your interview and come in. So 4 basic steps. It's pretty straightforward.
So that's ustraveldocs.com.ng /ng.
and again, there's a link in the left-hand showcase feature on the platform.
And then remember the website for the consulate is the www.nigeria.usembassy.gov, and I believe all that information is on there as well. Earlier we talked about touts and coaches, as you said, that help people, and you're saying you're discouraging people from.
Yes, greatly. It's best to come in with your true story, with why you really want to go to the U.S., what your legitimate ties here are to Nigeria. And again, we understand that ties can change over the years. And so your story one time will not automatically disqualify you for the future. But yes, do it yourself. Always better.
And Claire, Katrina, and Patrick have told us that they're trained, to look at your form, have a conversation with you and assess you. So those documents, all those Ghana must go. That you normally come with, please leave the Ghana must go at home. Just come as you are. Anyway, another question from Osemu. Osemu, I was just shortening your name because I don't want to bite my tongue. Osemu Enaholo says, how often are F2 visas refused for dependents, wife and kids of an F1 visa holder, and what are common reasons? So again, how often are F2 visas refused for dependents, wife and kids of an F1 visa holder, and what are the common reasons?
Sure. So just to decode that a little bit, F2 is the shorthand that we use for wives and children of student applicants.
Okay.
And F1, spouses of children, yeah, excuse me. So it should be, and then the F1 is the student, him or herself. So we don't have any specific percentage of how often that is, but what we normally look at is the relationship there. Do we think that this is your wife that you did not just marry so she could go to the US with you? And are these genuinely your kids? Those are very simple.
Okay. So if Patrick were to be a Nigerian, those two cats would not qualify.
Unfortunately,
right?
no.
Unfortunately,
They
no.
don't need visas.
Oh, they don't need, cats don't need visas, right?
No.
So I can travel with my dog.
I would check with the USDA.
Yeah.
And the airline.
And the airline.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay. I just thought about something. I have to move on from that. More questions are coming in. We'll take them as we go along. Now, we've also talked about the visa interview coach or consultant. Now, some people are saying there's some legitimate travel agencies. So we've talked about coys and touts and fakes, but there's some travel agencies that give legitimate sort of advice to people intending to travel. So is it safe to say that people shouldn't consult with those sort of like established travel agents and consultants?
I think, again, we would reiterate that we recommend that you fill out your own application and do the whole process on your own. What I can say is that we do, we have groups that come in, for tourist groups that want to travel as a group to the United States, and they might have been arranged by a travel agency. People shouldn't feel that they can't go to a travel agency at all. Like if they're wanting to travel as part of a school group, we do have things like that.
For special tours?
Yeah, special tour. Anyone who's interested in those types of things, we have a group appointment link that's also on our website, so you can see that for more information, how you might qualify as a group to do a tour, things like that. But in general, we recommend that people fill out their own application.
Yeah, and it's perfectly fine to go to a travel agency for travel purposes. Just don't accept their advice about the U.S. visa lists.
I mean, again, I would add, if you do use someone to help fill out the application, just be fully aware of what's being entered into the application on your behalf. The submit button, so to speak, should never be pressed unless you know everything that's been put in that application and you're okay with it.
I know we've said a lot about documents, but permit me to go back on that. I know that, and you've said it already, but just to reiterate that there's some documents in some specific cases that need to be brought. Do you want to just do a quick recap of that?
Sure. We talked earlier about the student visa. So anyone who's interested in applying for a student visa to study in the United States, they will need their I-20 form, which is issued from the school directly to the student, basically saying that the student has been enrolled, admitted to the school for that particular program. So we'll need to see that at the time of the interview. We'll also need to see the SEVIS confirmation fee payment to show that you paid the SEVIS fee at the time of the interview. So you will need those two documents. I don't think there's anything else for student visas.
Okay.
There are other visa classes
Where you would require
where you would require documentation such as a petition and things like that. But for the normal tourist visa,
one of the other cases that in which it is useful to bring in some documentation is when someone is applying on a B1, B2 visa, again, a visiting visa, but their specific intention is to have some kind of medical procedure done.
Okay.
In those kinds of cases, it is helpful to see, for example, correspondence with a medical facility of some kind or confirmation of your appointment. Something that can corroborate that you're going to the United States specifically for this purpose. And in those cases, we really want to understand, or we really want to make sure that this medical procedure that you're going for, that is you can afford it. So in those cases, we sometimes do ask more questions about monthly incomes and those kinds of things. Okay.
Well, if you have missed parts of this Hangout, we can say that it will be available after the Hangout on YouTube. It will be there permanently, so you can watch it again, share it with your friends, and preach the gospel. All right. Now we have a question, and this question is speaking about a particular case, and as we said earlier, we might not be able to address particular cases. However, I would paraphrase and pick out, a general question from it. So, if there's been any form of error on, a passport, for instance, and that an individual, an applicant uses that passport to make an application, and it's turned down for any reason, and corrections are made on that passport, and it's represented for another application, what are the chances that person gets a visa? Would there be any problem with that?
I think it all depends on how significant the difference is. I mean, if some person comes in one day for an interview and they say, my name is, so-and-so, and 6 months down the line, they come in and say they're someone totally different and they have a new passport, which raises a question of how they got that passport. That's a very material difference. But if it's the switching of, say, the month and day on the passport for the date of birth, that's something that we look at on a case-by-case basis and try to assess, is this a material difference? Big differences in dates of birth on one application versus another one, say like 10 years, that might be a material difference.
Okay.
But in most cases, we understand, we're not perfect as humans, and
absolutely.
People at various agencies, it's possible to enter in someone's information incorrectly and result in a document that does not reflect reality. So we understand that.
Do you want, is Katrina or Claire want to add anything?
No,
all right. There's a question here. How do you guys determine that an applicant is not in fact an intending immigrant, and how does someone overcome that presumption?
That's great, because that goes to the heart of what we're doing as visa officers. So Katrina outlined earlier the difference between non-immigrant and immigrant visas, and one of the basic qualifications for a non-immigrant visa is for you to be a non-immigrant, so not intending to immigrate. What we do is we ask questions about your purpose of travel, and we ask questions about your ties. So we talked about ties earlier, right? No magic number, it's a holistic picture. Why you want to come back to Nigeria, is your life in Nigeria, as Katrina mentioned. And then purpose of travel, we ask for purpose of travel to not only make sure that we're giving you the right classification of visa, but also to make sure that you are going for a specific purpose and not just to go to get to the United States and make a new life for yourself there. So that's why we asked for details about vacation plans. That's why we asked for more details about conferences. We want to understand why you are going to the US for this period of time. And so those are really the two things that we're looking for you to overcome the intending immigrant presumption.
Fantastic. All right. Idowu Oluwafemi on the platform has asked a question. He says, I've heard a lot of stories about people denied visas because a family member has applied for the immigrant visa and was denied. Can you shed more light on this?
Well, I'm not quite sure from the question if the asker is saying that a family member was not approved for an immigrant visa.
So someone applies for an immigrant visa, is denied the immigrant visa, and then other members of the family then apply and are denied. So he said he's heard a story like that before.
Okay.
I mean, I think this question, if the asker is asking about whether, a person has been, let's say a person has been petitioned by a family member to become an immigrant,
right,
in the past or recently or whatever, and then later down the line they come in for a non-immigrant visa. That's a case where, again, we really want to assess, does this person in fact intend to return to Nigeria? And we recognize that there is such a thing as dual intent. So someone may have an intent to immigrate either currently or in the past, but they still intend to follow the letter of the law and return to Nigeria. That's possible. That's dual intent, and we recognize that's a thing. So again, we really want to get back to what we've mentioned a couple times before. What is this person's ties to Nigeria? And in this case, do they intend to return to Nigeria?
And I do just want to mention, for individuals who are applying for immigrant visas and non-immigrant visas, we are one section. We do both types of interviews.
Okay.
And I'm not saying that this person was necessarily getting at this aspect of it, but it's important to note, if the visa officer assesses that you fraudulently represented yourself in an immigrant visa interview, that will transfer over to the non-immigrant visa process, and we will look very seriously at that during the application.
I just thought about the craziest idea, right?
What?
I like the fact that Patrick talked about dual intent earlier. So it occurred to me, what if someone genuinely illegally presented themselves? All right, so the person had an illegal intent or had a fraudulent intent, wanted to present themselves in a certain light because they wanted to go to the US. And how about if 2 or 3 years down the line, this person actually genuinely turns around and has turned a new leaf, and now maybe has a proper job, is earning a proper income and is a responsible citizen and really just wants to travel on holiday? Will their past sins?
That's a great question.
That's a really good question.
Will this individual's past sins be visited on them?
I think that this is another big myth. In this case, if you're talking about someone who has genuinely turned over a new leaf, then we will take a little bit more time. So it won't be a 3-minute interview.
Okay.
We will ask you questions about what were your motivations, why. We're trying to get at the sense of why this person may have turned over this new leaf. Is this new leaf genuine, and things like that. So I will say that for people who have genuinely made a shift in their life, there is an opportunity. But we will also say that we have a lot of people who say that they have turned over a new leaf, and that is not necessarily the case.
Okay.
So,
and you're trained to be able to spot those.
And like Claire said, we do recognize that your situation can change over time. And so maybe it's been a while since the last time you came in for an interview, and maybe you were denied at that time. Your situation could have changed, and that's what we're looking to assess. What is your situation now that we can reasonably assume that you're not intending to immigrate to the United States.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, you guys talked about travel history earlier, and I think Patrick mentioned it briefly. A lot of people think that prior travel is absolutely necessary before getting a U.S. visa. Do you want to talk about this?
I think that's a fantastic question, because I also think this is one of the big myths that is out there, that people will get automatically denied if they don't have any travel history. I've heard it be called like a virgin passport, like nothing in the passport, no stamps, anything. And that's absolutely untrue. It's not necessarily true that somebody is going to be denied just because they've never traveled outside of Nigeria before. Travel history is one of the many things that we may look at in determining and assessing your ties to Nigeria. Somebody who has traveled before for whatever purpose, it may be a good indicator that they, that they've done this before, right? They've said they were going to a conference in Europe and they went and they came back. And so now they're going for a conference in the US. It might be a good indicator that they're going to use the visa as they say that they will, but it's not necessary. It's not imperative that you've traveled somewhere before you come to apply for a US visa.
It's one of, as Katrina is saying, it's one of many factors we look at. And I'll take a little bit different angle on this and touch on another point that we've discussed, and that's, if someone doesn't have any travel history, people should be, we do see cases where people come in and present a passport that has been altered. We see fake visa stamps. And I think in some cases, these stamps are being put in by a tout or a coy. And that can seriously damage the credibility of an applicant. So if you don't have any travel history, just be upfront about it. Don't try to suggest that you have travel history that you actually don't.
All right. In the case of a refusal, is there an opportunity for for an applicant to appeal to a higher authority? Just send an email to. Okay, probably that would have been a good joke, but yeah. Is there a possibility to apply to a higher authority, maybe via email, possibly? Hopefully, a person can access it via private email. I still cracked the joke, but it's okay.
That's a good question. The consular officer's decision in an individual visa application, that is in a sense the final word on that application. People are welcome to apply and reapply at any point they want. But what I would say is people should assess, they should ask themselves the question, have my life circumstances significantly changed from my last application? If the answer is yes, then, and you think your life circumstances have changed in a way that would positively affect your chances for a visa, then, that's something to consider. But if you apply, one day and 90 days later, you're reapplying and the basic life circumstances have not changed in any way, someone may want to question whether that's a good time to submit another application. So even in the case of a refusal, we will still reconsider the case when a new application is put in down the line.
So what timeline are we looking at?
We generally recommend that people wait at least 90 days before they make a fresh application to come in for interview. However, like Patrick said, if it's not a sense of, okay, I wait 3 months and then I'll apply again and come in. If nothing has really changed about your life circumstances, it might behoove the applicant to think a little bit more about, is this the right time to spend all that money and apply again?
Sure. I know that you guys are very well trained and you guys do an excellent job, and it's a very difficult job, I must admit, but you guys are doing a great one at it. But what are the chances that, a consular officer is having a bad day and, just having a headache, Claire is not just in the mood, and then this guy just walks in and she just doesn't like his face, and the guy actually believes that there's every reason why I should get this visa, and maybe there's some emergency or something, and he's denied, right? In those sort of cases where the applicant feels strongly that, hey, I don't think I was dealt fairly with here, is there an avenue for that individual to at least be heard and make an application?
Right, and that's why we say that we recommend 90 days, but we will never restrict an applicant from reapplying with the same circumstances.
Okay.
So if you genuinely feel as if you were not given a fair shake at your visa interview, and we will freely admit we are human, that you are more than welcome to come in for another interview. What we will take into consideration, however, is the officer's prior decision. So the 90-day guideline is for you to have a change in your circumstances. If you apply before then, what we're going to look at is, okay, this applicant applied in the exact same circumstances and the decision was different. So we will review that's what we will take into consideration.
All right. Folashade Adigboyega has asked the question, and the question is, when there is a refusal during the interview, why doesn't the applicant get the exact reason for the refusal? They usually handed a slip that just states general and vague refusal reasons. This doesn't help the applicant in case he or she wants to reply. So I think the first issue here is, do you guys, this person is saying that the statement is vague on refusal reasons.
So it may seem vague, but it's actually the exact statute of the Immigration and Naturalization Act under which we are making that decision. So in that case, it's actually very specific and pertinent. And it's 214B, and that is that you did not overcome the presumption that you are an intending immigrant, or that we do not believe that the purpose of travel that you have presented is appropriate for the visa class to which you applied. And that seems like it's a very broad umbrella, but the way that our law is that that's actually only one of several different ways that someone could be refused a visa.
Okay.
So it's important to note that the reason why that letter is the way it is because it's that specific statute that we are making the determination under.
Okay. Do you want to add to that? Or?
No, I think that's a great answer.
Okay, I have a question here. Now, is there any procedure through which an applicant is not required to be interviewed by a consular officer? So under what conditions would an applicant seeking either renewal or seeking a visa not be interviewed if they're the president?
So what you're talking about here with this question, the most common type where we will waive the visa or the interview is for somebody who has had a previous visa for the tourist visa category. I believe it's within the last 2 years, right? So if you've had a previous visiting visa and it's expired within the last 24 months, you may be eligible for what is called our Dropbox visa renewal program. And what that basically is you will fill out the application, pay the fee, do everything that you normally would do for an interview, except instead of coming in to the consulate for an interview, you can send your passport and the application via one of our DHL offices, and we will do an automatic renewal of well, it's not automatic per se, but we will waive the interview for the renewal of the visa.
So it's not an automatic.
It's not
so
an automatic.
So you're not guaranteed to get a visa. You're not guaranteed
It's not
to get
guaranteed that you
renewal.
will get the visa without the interview.
Okay.
There may be various reasons that we may ask applicants to come back and appear for an interview before we reissue the visa.
Okay.
But you can go online and go through the steps to see if you are eligible for Dropbox, which is what we call it. And if you are, then you can go that route and your interview will be waived most likely.
Okay, there's another question here that says, in cases of visa, I mean, you've addressed it a bit, but I believe this would, unveil a bit more detail with regards to the act that you talked about. How can the applicant find out why they were denied the visa? And then there's a certain section 214B
Yes.
that needs some, little.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't want to recommend that people go online and read the INA, the Immigration and Naturalization Act, because even if you are a lawyer, it is obtuse in a very special kind of way.
Oh, wow.
The statute that is very important is 214B, and that is the statute that talks about what people are eligible for specific types of non-immigrant visas. And we want to be sensitive to applicants, and we want to be able to give them a constructive interview, but we also don't want to tell them that there's a magic bullet that will make them automatically eligible for a visa the next time they come in. Because we don't want to say, oh, go to Ghana twice and then you'll be eligible, right? Because that's not fair, not only to the next officer who has to deal with that case, but to the applicant who is laboring under a false impression that they're going to be eligible. So the reason we give this letter that gives the exact statute is that so people are aware of the legal basis for the decision, but also because there is no way that we could guarantee anyone a visa in their next interview. And it also goes, it's worth mentioning, I think, that we're legally prohibited from giving more specific reasons. So it's not just American visa officers sitting up there and saying, "Oh, we're very mean and we're very not friendly." It's because we are legally prohibited from discussing specifics of your case. Yep.
Fantastic. Now, I would have to appeal to you guys that we do this, sometime again soon, and possibly focus on student visas. So possibly, target this at students.
Yeah.
And say intending students, for both, undergraduate and postgraduate programs should listen in, for this course targeted at them, because we unfortunately weren't able to answer questions directly about the student visa. But we have about a minute, less than a minute, and maybe I'll just allow us quickly talk about student visas. We've talked about visas generally, but are there any specific details with regards to student visas that we need to touch on before we leave?
Yeah, I think so. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the biggest thing that differentiates a normal tourist visa from a student visa is the purpose of travel is more or less evident, right? We know that you want to study at a specific institution in the United States. But what we're looking for in the interview, we want to see why you chose this particular school, what you plan to study. We want to see how it fits into your previous educational history and your overall career goals, or what you see for yourself as a future. So those are the things that we're really looking at during the interview. We want to assess your student intent. Are you really going to go to the United States and study as you say you will?
All right, and Bankole Majasan just quickly sent a question in. How many admission letters must one have in the US before he or she can come for a student visa interview or apply for a student visa?
That's a great question, and I think it's important to make the distinction between admission letters and I-20 forms. I-20 is the piece of paper you need to apply for a student visa to the US, in addition to that SEVIS payment that we were talking about earlier, the $200. So admission letters, we don't necessarily need to see an admission letter because you can't get an I-20 form without having been admitted to the school. So I-20 forms, you need one to come in for the interview.
Just one.
Yes, you need to have made the selection of what school you would like to attend. That school will be noted in your visa, and that's what we're looking for. So,
I mean, we're really excited by all the huge number of Nigerians that are interested in studying in the United States, and we do offer some resources here at the consulate and at the embassy in Abuja for students who want to study in the U.S. We run a program called the Education USA Advising Center, and you can find more information about that on our website under the resources section. But basically, it's a resource center to which people can come and research schools, get individual advising sessions on all the accredited universities in the United States. And it's open to anybody on Wednesdays, and on the other days it's open to members.
All right. So this will be my final question, guys. Final question. We're in injury time. Can a student work in the U.S. with a student visa?
That's a great question. And there are some intricacies. So if you are interested in working in the U.S. while you're on a student visa, you want to make sure that you get all of the information, and so that you do it correctly, and you don't jeopardize your student status while you're in the U.S. So the short answer is yes, there are some scenarios in which students can work while they're studying in the United States. If you're working on campus, like at a campus cafe, something like that, you can do that on a student visa. The limit is you can't work more than 20 hours per week. If you're interested in working off campus, like working, doing an internship or working at a restaurant in town, something like that to make some extra money, you may also be able to do that, but there'll be extra authorization that you need to get from USCIS, right?
correct.
And I know
What's
that we have the
USCIS?
form, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, sorry.
Okay.
So you will have to get extra authorization from them, and I think you can find that information on our website. There's a certain form that you have to fill out to be authorized to work while you're studying. And again, it's still only 20 hours a week.
Okay. All right, guys. So that is it. The Google Hangout special one here, live from the U.S. Consulate General here in Lagos. Has been a fantastic one. Big thank you to everyone who joined in. I think at the peak we hit about 50 viewers. So a big thank you to you all. If we weren't able to answer your question, apologies that we weren't able to get to you. Now, finally, information for people to stay in touch. We've talked about the website, ustraveldocs.com. /NG. Remember, there's also the nigeria.usembassy.gov. You see, I got it. All right, so that's it. Thank you so much, Patrick.
Sure.
It was nice to
Thank
speak to
you.
you and Katrina.
Yes.
And again, a big thank you to the consulate management for this opportunity to be here and to host this Google Hangout.
Yeah.
I look forward to more.
And sorry for interrupting. If you do have additional questions, please feel free to use the hashtag #AskTheVOs, and we'll try and address them either in future Hangouts, hopefully, or via our social messaging sites.
All right.
And
So,
we do have some upcoming events. We're continuing our public outreach. So I know that we have a couple upcoming events specifically about student visas that are going to take place at a couple universities, right? So connect with us on Twitter or like our Facebook page to get more information about the upcoming events that we have if you have more questions or want to learn more about
Fantastic.
applying for visas in the US.
fantastic. Thank you all so much. And signing out, Oluwaseun P of Nigeria Info 99.3 FM. God bless. See you again.